The violent assault on law enforcement, particularly border enforcement, has become out of control, a threat environment that has literally never existed. Look in just the last few days. On Saturday in Portland, Oregon, the ICE facility there has been constantly under violent attacking the officers on a near daily basis. Saturday really got out of hand. But let's go to Friday, July 4th in Alvarado, Texas. You had 10 individuals now charged with attempted murder of a federal immigration official because they fired more than 20 to 30 shots from an assault rifle while wearing body armor on those ICE officers, shooting one in the neck, fortunately going to survive. And then Monday, just before 6 a.m. at the Border Patrol Annex facility in McAllen, Texas, an individual charged it with an assault weapon. Border Patrol officials were able to put that individual down. He is now deceased, but it wasn't before that individual shot a McAllen police officer in the leg. He also able to survive. These are just 3 of the violent attacks in the last 3 days. It's all part of a disturbing trend supported by DHS data, which you can see here shows assaults on ICE and other immigration officers are this year up almost 700% compared to this time last year. Joining us now to discuss, retired Border Patrol Chief Chris Clem. Chris, I've been with you. We covered the last 4 years, but now we seem to be in an environment that has never been more dangerous for Border Patrol agents or ICE officers. Why do you think we're here? Why does this exist, and why isn't more being done to stop it?
Well, good morning, Griff. And you know, it's a tough topic to talk about when you're talking about loss of life, because there's no law enforcement agent or officer that ever wants to take somebody's life, but they're trained to do so if necessary. I have to say a lot of this has to do with the left-wing propaganda, the stuff you hear from Democratic leaders, some of the mainstream media, you know, all they're saying, talking bad about immigration enforcement. And the incident that happened yesterday is a prime example of when you mess around, you find out. Border Patrol agents are trained to run to the sound of gunfire. You don't come to a Border Patrol facility and think you're going to get out, you know, scot-free. What happened yesterday is unfortunate. It shouldn't happen. And the media, the Democratic leadership that are anti-immigration enforcement need to tone it down, or unfortunately some of these things are going to continue because you got people that are just falling into this propaganda, wanting to make martyrs of themselves. I mean, we'll get more of the background on this individual, but, you know, Call of Duty has a reset button. Real life, it doesn't. And that unfortunately, that person met his demise yesterday.
Yeah, he apparently had a fascination with playing the video game Call of Duty. And it is interesting. You're right. He did find out the consequences because that specific Border Patrol Annex houses a Special Operations Division, which is the elite of the Border Patrol, BORTAC and BORSTAR agents in there. But do you share, Chief, Tom Hman's sentiment that if this continues, it's only a matter of time before an officer or an agent is killed?
Yeah, I mean, that's unfortunate, right? Statistically speaking, if you're going to continue to have these continuous assaults, these threats, these ambush type situations, you know, there's going to be an incident that happens where an agent or officer could lose their life. But I'm going to tell you this. I can speak from experience. Border Patrol is highly trained. The law enforcement partnerships that we work with are highly trained. We're prepared for these situations. But again, the numbers, when you look at what's happening in LA, when you see other facilities where they ambush officers and agents, you know, it is going to be a statistic that's going to be a problem. However, vigilance is key to our, you know, esprit de corps and our mission with the Border Patrol. And they're definitely going to be on alert, but they're going to be ready for it.
Yeah, and Chief, coast to coast, whether it's LA Mayor Bass out there obstructing federal law enforcement being carried out, to Hakeem Jeffries, who is the minority leader of the Democrats in the House, just standing in total opposition. Why, in the last 30 seconds I've got, why don't they see the need to cross political lines and protect officers?
You know, that's a hard question to answer because I can't understand the ideology and the thinking of somebody that way. These are federal lawmakers, or at least Jeffries is. And then you have Karen Bass, a former congresswoman, now a mayor of a major city, that is not looking at integrity and accountability of enforcing the law and upholding the law. So it's like they've dug their their trenches and they're staying with it. They have the American people spoke on this last election.
Yeah.
They are for immigration enforcement. Cooperation will save lives and bring the integrity back to the system that we all want so well.
You're right. We've got to leave it there. Former Border Patrol Chief Chris Clem, thank you for your time.
You got it. Thank you.
All right. You know, meanwhile, we've been talking this morning, and as someone who covered the border, it's just outrageous that the threat environment against Border Patrol officials, ICE agents, has never been higher. We had, of course, the attack just before 6 a.m. down in McAllen, Texas, on the Border Patrol Annex. You can see this is actually from another one. This is the Border Patrol Annex in McAllen. I've been there many times. It houses the Special Operations Division. This individual charged it with a rifle and was killed in the process. And of course, this comes after we just saw the shooting outside a ICE facility in Prairieland, Texas, which 10 individuals have now been charged with first-degree attempted murder of a federal agent because they fired off 20 to 30 automatic rifle rounds at officers, ICE officers, striking one in the neck, fortunately, who will be okay. In McAllen, by the way, a McAllen police officer who helped respond to the incident was shot in the leg. He'll be okay. But it's all part of why you're hearing from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt that, you know, we're going to get to the bottom of these instances, and it's time for the rhetoric to tone down. Watch.
We certainly call on Democrats to tone down their rhetoric against ICE and Border Patrol agents who, again, are everyday men and women. I would encourage AOC and other Democrats to actually meet with the United States Border Patrol. These are honorable Americans who are just simply trying to do their job to enforce the law. They go home to their families every night just like we all do, and they deserve respect and dignity for trying to enforce our nation's immigration laws and to remove public safety threats from our communities. The White House is aware of the shooting that took place today in Texas, and we are working with the appropriate federal agencies to get to the bottom of what happened.
Charlie and Emily, we're learning more, and we will continue to learn more about the incident that happened in Alvarado, Texas. The Northern District of Texas putting out at least these details now, saying the defendants dressed in black military-style clothing began shooting fireworks at the facility as part of an organized attack when the Alvarado police officer arrived. One alleged defendant, positioned in nearby woods, shot the officer in the neck area. Another alleged assailant across the street fired 20 to 30 rounds at unarmed correctional officers who had stepped outside the facility. Additionally, officers found spray paint, flyers stating "Fight ICE Terror" with class warfare and "Free all political prisoners," and a flag stating "Resist fascism, fight oligarchy."
It underscores the organized effort behind this. And so to Caroline Leavitt's point, we're going to find out who's at the bottom of this. And that's a little bit of a contrast from that single person that ambushed there in McAllen who, you know, loved Call of Duty. And as the former director, Chris Clem, said, well, there's no reset button in real life, right? There's one in your video game. But the reality is that somehow there is funding, there is organization, and there is leadership behind these attacks. And it's behind the reason or part of the reason why now ambush attacks have risen almost 800%. It is patently unacceptable, but I have faith in this administration. Not only will they identify those sources and the origins, but they will also put a stop to it.
Well, you know, a lot of this unrest is perpetrated by people who are just out to protest absolutely anything. They don't care what it is. If they can cause mayhem, they will. And I think there's a huge funding apparatus that pays for a lot of that stuff. But of course, this is a whole lot more targeted. This is very specific, targeted at ICE officers. And of course, it all mirrors a lot of what we hear from actual elected political officials in the Democrat Party. And so they do bear responsibility for toning down the rhetoric and standing up to this faction within their party. This is a real part of their party. And we had an election. The electorate spoke very clearly that they want our immigration laws enforced. They want to have a border. And the problem for Democrats is that even Democrat voters want that. And so at some point, Democrat officials, Democrat politicians need to stand up and to this faction and put an end to this nonsense.
The American people spoke clearly.
And Senator Markwayne Mullen, Republican of Oklahoma, joins us now. An increase in attacks against ICE agents. Just look at this chart, kind of hard to take. January 21st versus June 30th. 2024 was 10. 2025, 79. That's a 690% increase, sir. How do you see it?
Well, Dana, it's not surprising. When you have the Democrats that are out there constantly villainizing the ICE agents, actually leading the charge towards obstruction and getting in their way and not treating them with respect as true law enforcement, this is going to continue to happen. And the most damning thing about this, Dana, is this absolutely silence from the Democrat Party. If this was any other time, you'd have every Democrat out there saying that we need gun control, and that'd be the first place they ran to. Now they're not saying a word about it. At the same time, President Trump is trying to install law and order back in these blue states, in these blue cities where these criminals are running rampant. And this is a criminal attack. There is no question, Dana, that this was organized. When you have individuals with the tactical gear that they had, when you have jammers that are on site, you have an ambush that is truly set up the way that it was. This was, as you said, this is not a peaceful demonstration. This was a planned attack, and the Democrats should be held responsible that have been villainizing the ICE agents for the last, what, 3 months, 4 months?
Senator, find out more for us on this person who was shot and killed in McAllen. Said to be 27 years old, from the state of Michigan, no prior record. His name is Ryan Lewis Mosqueda. He showed up with a car that had Cordis Dei, which is a Latin phrase meaning Day of the Heart, which corresponds with some video game that apparently has a revolutionary movement that aims to cripple capitalist governments. Can you tie all that together? And what have you found out about this person?
Of course you can. When you have some type of, I haven't got a briefing on it. I actually plan on getting briefed today. But when you have someone with a little bit of mental illness or this fantasy about what they perceive to be reality around them, and then you have government officials like the Democrats from the Senate to the House, a Democrat Party that is out there literally feeding into your beliefs because of whatever your reality world that you live in, this is going to continue to feed that type of aggression. When you live by fire, when you stir up fire and that is your base, that fire is going to eventually come at you, and unfortunately it's going to start burning innocent individuals. And what I mean by that, these are the ICE agents that are just trying to do their job. I mean, these are sworn officers that are getting criminals. These aren't immigrants. These are criminals. There's a huge difference between immigrants and criminals. Criminals are the ones that came over illegally, and they continue to be illegal inside the United States. Unfortunately, that huge population is also creating a tremendous amount of crime, and now you have organized crime that's feeding off the Democrat Party, that is feeding off the individuals that have this false reality. And I believe that this is going to continue to happen, and it should never, ever take place. They should be condemning this action right now. Every Democrat leader should be condemning what happened, and yet they haven't said a single word about it.
Well, there was one thing that was said, and this was told to Axios by a House Democrat, unnamed, and you could imagine why when I read this to you. Democrats told to get shot for the anti-Trump resistance. Quote, our own base is telling us that what we're doing is not good enough. There needs to be blood to grab the attention of the press and the public. Do you have any Democratic colleagues? I know that's a House Democrat that said that, but anyone in the Senate pushing back and saying this is not the way to go, guys?
I would hope that that is just a false story that Axios is putting out there, that there was actually not an elected leader that would actually say that. Unfortunately, I believe it probably is true. And no, I have not heard one person condemning that. That enough, Dana, should scare the living daylights out of you. This is why the American people chose to go with President Trump and the Republican Party, because they're tired of this lawlessness. They're tired of this criminal activity that's continuing to take place. They're tired of the pandering to illegals, to criminal activities that the Democrat Party is leaning into, this woke DEI, do what feels right, forget about law and order, defund the police mentality that the Democrat Party has fed into their base. The American people want a country that they can walk down the streets and feel safe. They want to be able to go jogging. They want to know their kids are going to be safe when they're outside in the streets riding their bikes. They want to know that the fentanyl isn't going to kill some innocent kid that just accidentally took something that he didn't know what he was taking. They want to make sure that we have law and order back in our streets, and that's what President Trump is delivering for the American people. And yet the Democrat Party is pushing back on it. And these are the same people they allowed to come across our southern border. What did they think was going to happen? They own this. This is their fault. This is their responsibility.
Senator, thank you for your time.
And just to be clear, I just want to be clear. I mean, Axios put that out there yesterday. There was no other pushback, and we had it on the 5 as well. So they're not making it up.
No, I know, but I would hope they are, but I believe they're right. It just is sickening that any Democrat leader would ever say that.
Well, it's likely to get worse, unfortunately.
I agree.
Senator, thank you for your time. We'll follow all of it. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Have now charged 10 suspects for the attempted murder after an attack on that ICE facility in Alvarado, Texas. The DOJ formally labeling this as an organized tactical ambush. Let's bring in Paul Perez. He is the National Border Patrol Council president. So let's take a look. We'll put it back up on the screen. What exactly happened here in Alvarado and other places? Saturday, June the 14th, 3 people were arrested for attacking officers with knives and fireworks in Portland, Oregon. Friday, the 4th of July, police officers shot in the neck at an ICE facility in Alvarado, Texas. And then Monday, July the 7th, 3 law enforcement officers injured in a shooting at a Customs and Border Protection facility in McAllen, Texas. From January 21st to June 30th, total assaults against federal agents numbered 79. That's a 690% increase year over year. What do you think, Paul, is behind this?
Well, I think, number one, a lot of the dangerous rhetoric that the Democrats are talking about and people on the left, there's a lot of misinformation. They're calling our agents thugs. They're going after them. They're not only protesting, but attacking them. And it's due to the recklessness on the part of these people on the left. And it's going to get some people killed. Unfortunately, the gentleman, the guy that came and attacked the office yesterday, that's my backyard. Our agents are some of the best trained law enforcement agents in the country. He picked the wrong place, and they dealt with him appropriately.
Yeah, he is no gentleman or not, and I think some people might think that he was certainly not. He is no more. So, you know, this does feed in, though, to something that the Democrats have been saying. This was carried in Axios a couple of days ago, that they're saying, well, we've got to step up our opposition, our resistance to the Trump administration and what it's doing. In fact, people need to get shot. There needs to be blood in order to bring this to attention. Well, a guy got shot yesterday after he tried to shoot federal officers. So, I mean, is the rhetoric here borderlining on completely irresponsible?
100%. And it may even rise to the level of criminal conduct. They will be held accountable. The Department of Justice isn't playing these games. This is not Biden's Department of Justice where they're going after politicians. They are going to go after the criminals. And if anybody's out there harming law enforcement officers like they did in Alvarado, Texas, and like they tried to do in McAllen, Texas yesterday, they're going to be dealt with severely. Our agents aren't going to play these games. They're very well trained, and they're ready to take on the fight.
So I just want to show our audience some of what the U.S. Attorney's Office in Texas is showing in relation to that Alvarado, Texas assault. Graffiti was painted on some cars there. This one says Ice Pig, similar graffiti on another car. That was designed to try to entice officers to come out of the building. This is pictures of a tactical ballistic vest and some magazines that were shown by the U.S. Attorney's Office. There you see it on the screen. There is a flag that was confiscated that says resist fascism, fight oligarchy. I mean, that's right out of the Bernie Sanders AOC playbook. And then there were printed materials as well, including something, organization for attack, or organizing for attack, insurrectionary anarchy. I mean, a lot of this seems to be right out of the Democratic playbook.
Yeah, you're right. These are antagonists. They're out there trying to antagonize our agents. And again, they're engaging in criminal misconduct. The scumbag that came out yesterday, he paid for it with his life. You can't come after highly trained officers and agents and expect them to back down. We're not going to do that. Under this president, we've got the support to make sure that we're out there doing the job that America elected him to do. They told him that they wanted this border cleaned up. They wanted all the criminals out. And that's what he's doing. That's what he campaigned on. And we're going to be out there doing it. We're not going to stop. We're not going to be threatened by these lone wolves or groups. And so we don't know who they're working with, but we're going to find out, and they're all going to be held accountable.
Yeah, Tom Hman has said because of the heated rhetoric, it's only a matter of time before somebody gets killed. Obviously, the assailant was killed yesterday. A police officer, though, in Alvarado, nearly lost his life on the 4th of July. I mean, a lot of people are saying it's time for cooler heads to prevail. We'll see if that happens. Paul, thank you for joining us. I always appreciate you coming on. Back-to-back ambushes targeting immigration officers in Texas, and the Trump administration says Democrats' rhetoric is to blame for the uptick in violence. Welcome to a new hour of America Reports. I'm John Roberts in Washington. Good to be with you, Sandra.
Good to be with you, too, John. I'm Sandra Smith in New York. So in Alvarado, Texas, 10 suspects are facing attempted murder charges after someone shot an officer responding to cars being vandalized at an ICE detention center. And hundreds of miles away in McAllen, Texas, CBP agents killed an armed suspect, stopping a potential massacre before it could begin.
Our political panel takes that up in just moments.
But first, let's get to our chief correspondent, Jonathan Hunt. Jonathan, what else are we learning about these suspects?
Well, Sandra, 10 people have now been charged with attempted murder in the attack on an ICE facility in Alvarado, Texas. These are the 10 currently charged in what appears to be the most coordinated of all the recent attacks on ICE and Border Patrol agents and facilities. It began with the attackers all dressed in what investigators describe as black military-style clothing, shooting fireworks at the Prairieland Detention Center. Around 10 minutes later, one or two of them broke off from the main group and began spray painting the facility and vehicles parked there with words like traitor and other slogans. A police officer arrived, and at that point, one of the group, who had apparently hidden in trees near the facility, opened fire, hitting the officer in the neck, while another attacker, also across the street, fired dozens of rounds at officers who were emerging from the facility.
It was a planned ambush with the intent to kill ICE corrections officers. Make no mistake, this was not a so-called peaceful protest. It was indeed an ambush.
As well as weapons and body armor, police also discovered anarchist literature and flyers in one of the vehicles used by the attackers, material now being closely looked at as part of the investigation. Separately, investigators are also looking into the background of a man shot dead by Border Patrol agents after he opened fire on them at a facility in McAllen, Texas yesterday. And one of the big questions, Sandra, yet to be answered is whether all of these attacks against ICE and Border Patrol are entirely separate incidents, or whether there is some form of coordination behind them, and if so, who is organizing this violence and who might be funding it. Sandra?
All right, Jonathan Hunt on that for us. Jonathan, thank you. John.
All right, for more on all of this, let's bring in Yemen Eggbo, Chief of Staff to the White House Press Office under President Biden, and T.W. Origi, former National Press Secretary for the National Republican Senatorial Committee. So this was what Axios wrote about Democrats demanding violent confrontation and resisting the Trump administration. Some of them have suggested, Axios wrote, what we really need to do is be willing to, quote, get shot when visiting ICE facilities or federal agencies. A third House Democrat told Axios, our own base is telling us that what we're doing is not good enough. There needs to be blood to grab the attention of the press and the public, the lawmaker said. Well, someone did get shot and killed in McAllen, Texas yesterday, but that person was trying to shoot federal agents. I mean, is this what Democrats want?
No, of course not. And fighting harder doesn't mean fighting violently. We need to use every Democratic tool that we have. And I appreciate that Democratic lawmakers are listening to their constituents. That unnamed constituent doesn't speak for the entire base. And I think what constituents are saying is we are frustrated and we feel like nobody's doing enough to push back. And of course, those who are the most extreme and on the fringe are going to act in ways that are completely uncalled for.
I mean, when you listen to some of the rhetoric, though, and some of the ways that Democrats have been castigating not just the administration, but people who are on the front lines of this, like ICE agents, Border Patrol agents, and others, it's not too much of a leap to think that somebody who is on the extremist fringe would take matters into their own hands and perpetrate incidents not only like this, but the one that happened in Alvarado on Saturday.
Absolutely.
Or on Friday, I mean.
We've seen this movie before. You know, there's a book out today by Josh Jossi, Tyler Pager, and Isaac Arnsdorf called 2024, How Trump Won the White House and the Democrats Lost America. Look, in 2020, we saw all the riots after George Floyd, and there was a general consensus that something needed to be done about policing. The Democrats transformed that into a violent, anti-police, defund the police rhetoric that they lived with for a long time. Now today, fast forward, there was a poll done last month. The majority of people support ICE agents. Sure, no one wants to see somebody who he is here legally or somebody innocent get deported, and J.D. Vance and Tom Hman have said they rectify that. But taking it to this next step of committing violence against the men and women of ICE who are doing their job, enforcing the law of the land, and enforcing immigration policy that was not enforced for 4 years, where we had 10 million plus illegal immigrants come into this country, is completely irresponsible, and it will lead to more bloodshed, and it will lead to more electoral disasters for the Democrats.
I mean, we look at some of the material that was confiscated from the Alvarado ambush. There's a flag there that says resist fascism, fight oligarchy. That's right under Bernie Sanders and AOC's playbook. There's some other literature there that goes along with it. You mentioned Tom Hman. Here's what Tom Hman said about the rhetoric and then what we're seeing. Listen here.
The ramped up rhetoric is going to cause a situation where someone loses their life. We saw that today. I was hoping I'd be wrong, but I wasn't. And I'll tell you something else. It's not the end. Unless we stop the hateful rhetoric against ICE and Border Patrol, comparing them to Nazis, there's going to be more situations like that.
So the person who lost their life yesterday was an assailant, but in Alvarado, it was almost a local police officer was shot in the neck, thankfully. Survived that. I mean, is it time to tone down the rhetoric here?
Well, Democrats have been calling for the rhetoric to be toned down for quite a while now. I would say even from January 6th, we've been calling for rhetoric to be toned down and also been in support of law enforcement. When we saw the Minnesota lawmakers unfortunately lose their life, that was a time where we called for Republican leadership and the President of the United States to call the governor of Minnesota to attend the funeral of the Minnesota lawmakers, to show unity at a time when we do have divisive partisan rhetoric.
All right, so you say that the rhetoric's been toned down, which leads me to this montage of what Democrats have actually been saying. Watch here.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets. They're in unmarked vans, wearing masks, being shipped off to foreign torture dungeons.
People are terrified for their lives and for their neighbors, folks getting snatched off the street by secret police who are wearing masks.
And every single one of them, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, will, of course, be identified.
And that's some of the mild stuff. I mean, is that toning down the rhetoric?
No, and obviously we can cite examples like Steve Scalise or the threats against Justice Kavanaugh, et cetera, et cetera. Look, all violence is bad. There's no question about it. Those politicians you saw, like Mayor Wu from Boston, running a sanctuary jurisdiction, Governor Walz overseeing sanctuary jurisdictions. There's sanctuary jurisdictions in New York. There were violent criminals that were allowed back on the street that they had the chance to turn over to ICE agents. Tom Hman, who was awarded a medal by Barack Obama for his great work, has seen what the disasters of violent immigrants coming across our border do to our communities, do to innocent people. That is where this focus should be. Tom Hman has said that if there's a mistake made, he will fix it. But priority number one is when you have people who are here illegally, who are committing crimes, who are violent in nature from their previous country, they need to be dealt with.
Sorry, I just want to ask Yemisi one more thing. I don't have the soundbite right now, but in 1996, Bill Clinton said something that would be taken to be, I don't want to say far-right ideology right now, but certainly would come out of the Republican rubric, where he said people are frustrated about illegal immigration. People can't just come into this country illegally, and yes, we have to deport them. What happened between then and now with the Democratic Party?
Democrats have always stood for common sense immigration reform. Michelle Wu,
and common sense is letting more than 10 million people in this country illegally in 4 years?
The mayor of Boston is speaking at a time when it's not just illegals that are being picked up, it's also students. She saw somebody who went to Tufts that was picked up off the street. I mean, if the administration administration wants to tone things down, then work on the messaging of this. People are being picked up outside of schools, outside of churches. People are being deported accidentally to other countries. I mean, we can also get a handle on this from the Republican point of view.
The bigger problem is Mayor Wu wouldn't allow Border Patrol officials and ICE officials into the jails to get people who committed violent crimes until a raid just last month in Boston that got a lot of violent illegal criminals off the streets. Had she done her job as mayor and reported those people to ICE, we wouldn't have had those issues.
A problem for Democrats is immigrants going to their court-appointed hearings and getting picked up.
All right. We'll leave it there, folks, but this is not obviously the last word. Appreciate it. Thank you.
So let's bring in Border Czar Tom Hman. Good to have you with us, sir. Thank you for being here. So we've got body armor, we have ARs, we have Faraday bags to protect the cell phones that they were using, pamphlets in the car, 20 to 30 rounds at the officer. What do you make of the organization and sophistication level of this? And what are you doing to protect your agents in light of these attacks?
Well, look, unfortunately, Martha, I said over 2 months ago, I said on your network, numerous networks, I do a lot of interviews, I said over 2 months ago, if the rhetoric continues against ICE agents and Border Patrol agents about being compared to terrorists, like Congressman J. Paul did, being compared to Nazis and racists, that it's going to end with the use of force, that either a criminal is going to die or an officer is going to die. I've seen this recipe before. I knew it was coming, and I don't think it's over. And look, this is a well-planned attack, as the person said, and we're investigating on the connections between the Texas incident and the incident at the Alvarado facility, the two incidents of Border Patrol and ICE. There are some connections, but I'm not going to get in the middle of that criminal investigation. It's ongoing. But it's a well-planned attack, and it's because of the rhetoric. These nuts that want to take it beyond protesting to criminal activity, they're getting rhetoric from the members of Congress, the senators who compare ICE to the Nazis, and Congressman J. Paul compared it to terrorist organizations. So these people, these fringe groups, feel emboldened. If a member of Congress can attack ICE, why can't we? So in response to this, ICE facilities, the security protocol has been heightened to the highest levels, along with Border Patrol facilities. And here's what they need to understand. We're not going to stop enforcing immigration law. President Trump made a promise to the American people to secure the border. We have the most secure border in the history of the nation today. Now we got a lot of illegal alien, criminal, public safety threats, national security threats we need to find and remove. This is not going to slow us down. We're going to do this job.
Well, obviously, your agents are in very difficult positions. In some of these cases, these officers were unarmed, and they've got, someone coming at them with an AR-15. So that's a very bad situation. It reminds me in some ways of what we saw with the Weather Underground, killing police officers. So we got to be very aware. Very different situations, different claims that both sides are making, but we got to be very careful about the officers in these situations. I want to ask you about the effort for immigration, because it has moved in some cases from worst of the worst to anyone who is here illegally. And here's what President Trump said about it today in the cabinet meeting.
There's no amnesty. What we're doing is we're getting rid of criminals, but we are doing a work program. We've got to give the farmers the people they need, but we're not talking amnesty.
So is it hands off of farm workers in places like California right now? Is that the message? Because there was a time when there was a real push to up the numbers of those that were removed from the country. So where does that stand now?
Well, look, the president, he's been very vocal. He wants to do something with farm work and the hospitality industry. So there's some discussions ongoing with that now. I'm not going to get ahead of the president on those decisions. But worksite enforcement, it's like everything else we do. It's based on prioritization. Worksite enforcement, there's a lot of criminal leads on worksite enforcement, whether it concerns sex trafficking or forced labor trafficking, abuse of the aliens that are working for them. And so we concentrate on the criminal aspect of worksite enforcement. They're always going to remain the priority. So worksite enforcement continue, but based on prioritization. But there is some discussion going on about farmers. I'm not going to get ahead of the president on that, but I know the
So there's going to be a work program for people who are here illegally?
I don't think that decision has been made yet. Again, I don't want to get ahead of the president of that decision. But one thing I want to talk about, when you mentioned that we're getting beyond the worst of the worst, actually we're not. But like the MacArthur Park, you covered with Mr. Hilton, why were they there? Because MacArthur Park is a staging area for alien smuggling activities, which is a felony. And if you want to buy a fake green card or a fake Social Security card, you go to MacArthur Park. That's been like that for decades.
Do you think those people got a heads up because it was cleared out by the time they got there?
then the operation got leaked.
Yeah. All right, Tom Hman, thank you very much. Borders are ICE overseer. Thank you very much, Tom. Good to see you.
You got it.
Welcome back. Well, the White House urging Democrats, pick your verb, pleading with Democrats, lecturing Democrats, asking Democrats to tone down the dangerous rhetoric as ICE agents continue to face attacks. But Democrat senators like Cory Booker and Alex Padilla are doubling down with a bill requiring agents to take off their masks during immigration enforcement. The masked nature of ICE immigration agents has played into their narrative, their dystopian tale of a modern-day American Handmaid's Tale. But that, right now, is not the reality in America, as we see attacks on ICE agents predicate the need for many to cover up their face. I mentioned Senator Padilla. You remember him from this political stunt?
Hands up, hands up. I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the secretary, because the fact of the matter is a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your hands off.
And while some Democrats are taking aggressive action, others are calling for aggressive oversight.
We need aggressive oversight as it relates to the overly aggressive behavior that we've seen, from ICE, from the Department of Homeland Security. It's not what the American people actually, in my view, voted for. Donald Trump and Republicans promised to go after violent felons, but instead they're going after law-abiding immigrant families. And in fact, in some cases, deporting American citizens and children, some with cancer.
That hyperbolic rhetoric from the House Minority Leader is warped. Warped is an accurate description of Hakeem Jeffries and his photoshopping skills, which you can clearly see in the latest post over the 4th of July weekend there. Take a close look at the photo. See the bench that he's leaning against? Those panels, warped. Something that can only be done through Photoshop by someone looking to make themselves a little bit slimmer in their presentation. While Democrats are warped in their rhetoric, we're seeing a big jump in violence toward federal agents. In less than a week, there have been 2 ambush attacks on ICE facilities in Texas. In Alvarado, 10 suspects have been charged with attempted murder, and the final suspect is still at large. Officials say they opened fire outside of a detention center. One officer was shot in the neck. Officials believe the suspects attempted to lure ICE agents by shooting fireworks and vandalizing agents' vehicles. During the investigation, officials then found AR-style rifles. 20 to 30 rounds had been shot off from a parking lot across the street. A sniper was hidden in the woods as their cohorts shot these fireworks to lure out ICE agents. And they were arrested with propaganda like you see on your screen now that reads, "Resist fascism, fight oligarchy, and fight ICE terror with class war." Officials are saying the evidence suggests this whole thing was a planned ambush.
It was a planned ambush with the intent to kill ICE corrections officers. Make no mistake, this was not a so-called peaceful protest. It was indeed an ambush.
Investigators also found 12 sets of body armor and 2-way radios. So here to react is acting ICE enforcement and removal operations Dallas Field Office Director Josh Johnson. Director, thanks for being with us here today. I should say at the outset, the Alvarado police officer that was shot has been released from the hospital, and he seems to be in good condition at the moment. But you had this play out over the holiday weekend on the 4th of July. Tell me how this occurred and your thoughts as this was taking place just in neighboring south of Fort Worth.
Yeah, so thanks for having me today. On Friday evening, after celebrating fireworks on the 4th of July, got a phone call that I needed to report to the Prairie Land Detention Center, and an officer had been shot in the neck. And so we responded down there, and unfortunate situation with the amount of rhetoric going on with fireworks being shot at the facility, drawing employees outside the facility, and then Alvarado police officer was shot in the neck.
You talk about the rhetoric. You mentioned that almost in passing right there, the amount of rhetoric going on. What are the conditions right now that you're operating under as the director of the Dallas ICE field office. I'm curious, did this come as a shock, as a surprise to you? Are you operating under a heightened environment of alert as we speak?
Absolutely. We're seeing a 700% increase in assaults on staff. And as you see some of these images, they're playing Ice Pig and some of the other traitor and bigot that was sprayed on the employees' vehicles, the damage to the facility. I mean, this is completely unacceptable and outside of what I think any of us are accustomed to or should have to tolerate.
And look, I don't think this particular story and the details around it can be easily overlooked or moved on from. This is, by very good fortune, not a tragedy we're talking about today at a pretty large scale. You've got a dozen people in what appears to be a coordinated attempt to lure ICE agents out. And it appears, tell me if the details are correct, 2 shooters poised to take down ICE agents as they came out of the building.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a coordinated group. They had body armor, two-way radios, and they were not messing around with long guns. Several different types of firearms were recovered at the scene, and unfortunately, an officer was shot in the neck. So this is not a protest. This was an ambush.
And at this point, and I don't presume that ICE is conducting the investigation, but any sense yet at the level of planning for something like this? Were there others behind the scenes? I know one's still at large, but more than we already know in terms of putting this together?
Right now, the investigation is ongoing. The FBI is continuing to execute search warrants in the area, and we hope to make additional arrests. You're seeing some of the propaganda that some of the people were in possession of. One individual was arrested for obstruction, trying to remove evidence. So I'm confident that the FBI will continue their investigation and other arrests will be made.
All right. Well, we're grateful that your officers were not hurt, and we appreciate you joining us today to shed some light on what ended up to be an almost completely tragic situation over there in Alvarado. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Democrat voters are out for blood, and it looks like radicals are happy to deliver. 2 separate ICE facilities ambushed, just 3 days apart. We just got the mugshots from one of the attacks. 10 suspects charged with attempted murder. The feds say they showed up in black military-style gear and were armed to the teeth. The plan? Set off fireworks to lure agents out of the building so they could slaughter them. One police officer took a bullet to the neck, but survived. And sadly, this is exactly the kind of bloodlust Democrat voters are demanding. House Democrat lawmakers telling Axios how their voters want to see someone get shot while resisting Trump. Quote, our own base is telling us that we're not doing good enough and that there needs to be blood to grab the attention of the press and the public. Some progressives are trying to satisfy the mob. This lawmaker thinks it's inspiring to block ICE.
Some of the most inspiring things have been when people encircle courtrooms and refuse to allow ICE agents in. There are all kinds of nonviolent resistance tactics that we have to use. And I've started something called Resistance Lab. It's a training on really the documented, most effective ways to counter Democratic backsliding, nonviolent resistance tactics, to build that movement.
But Tom Hman warns it's only a matter of time before an ICE agent pays with their life.
These nuts that want to take it beyond protesting to criminal activity, they're getting rhetoric from the members of Congress, the senators who compare ICE to the Nazis, and Congressman J. Paul compared to the terrorist organizations. So these people, these fringe groups, feel emboldened. If a member of Congress can attack ICE, why can't we?
So, Dana, as a Democrat, how would you handle when a good chunk of your base wants blood?
I think I would forcefully push back, and I would advocate for strong enforcement measures like prosecution for attempted murder. If you look at those people, most of them are young.
Yeah.
And their lives are pretty much ruined. Right? You got a mugshot. It's going to be very, very hard for them to recover from this. I'm sure their parents are not proud in any way. And you think about how they must have gotten lured in. I was just talking to Greg because I was trying to remember. Years ago, Rosie O'Donnell encouraged Reality Winter to break the law, right? Or and encouraged, like when she leaked all those documents, they developed this bond of support. Like, well, what happened to Reality Winter? Right? Who had to pay the legal bills? When you're in a position of responsibility and you're advising younger people who might be ignorant of the situation, or maybe they have no morals or no character, then that's on you. And if you don't want to be tagged with them, then that's, again, on you. I said something this morning, and I like to repeat, because when I was thinking about this with these people, what they want is political suicide by cop. Mm-hmm. They want to be shot so that they can get attention. Well, President Trump was actually shot, and it wasn't for a political stunt. And we're coming up on that anniversary, and I think that the left has a real problem with political violence, and these folks are going to hopefully be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law because they didn't commit this crime in Philly or New York or Los Angeles where it might get blown over. They're going to be prosecuted in Texas, and that will be different.
Not a beauty contest, Greg, when you look at these mugshots.
How dare you objectify these beautiful men? Because I think there are a few of those are men in there, but they identify as female. Why is there always a high percentage of trans in either Antifa or any of these violent activities? When you look into it, somebody always is trans, and it's because they're not women. Women do not participate in these highly violent, testosterone-laden activities. They're just thugs, male thugs. And you grow out your hair, you're still a thug. You know what's interesting about this is I grew up watching a lot of movies, and there was always this stereotype that it's this right-wing white guy with a shotgun and a trucker hat. That's what we're supposed to, the stereotype of the right is well-armed, rabidly prone to violence. But in reality, it's always the left who projects this stereotype onto us. They are the right may have guns, they have definitely more guns, and they may know how to use them. But they don't see it as an acceptable means to further your political aims. So why does the left do that? Because if you see the world through the prism of oppressed versus oppressor, there are no limits when fighting the oppressor. You can do anything. Remember, when you're fighting Hitler, i.e. Trump, everything was on the table. So the left isn't good at violence. They just love violence because to them, it's just another tool in their little toolkit to win. Remember, January 6th, amazingly, I know this is crazy, the only unarmed insurrection ever. The only gun used was on a female unarmed protester by a liberal cop.
And they called that cop a hero.
Yeah, exactly. Where are all the Dems right now who call January 6th worse than 9/11? You're having insurrections now every day. People are actually going out of their way with weapons to hurt people. Imagine you're an enemy of America. You must be thrilled with your 10-year plan. You've already got the border demonized. You instigated a mass invasion, and now you're getting citizens to attack their own government. The only difference is it's not an external enemy. The enemy is within, and they use the principles of the very country to destroy it. I am the victim. I am the oppressed. Therefore, I am justified to attack this country. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, Harold.
Emily, the sophistication here, it's a little different than what we usually see from Antifa. Usually it's fireworks or they're throwing rocks, but they've planned this. They've obviously trained. This was premeditated. There is weaponry here that you usually don't associate with Antifa. Is this like more of a domestic terror situation?
It looks like that because, look, there's 10 people on that screen. Among them, they had 12 sets of body armor. They had like shortwave, two-way radios. I mean, you're absolutely right that there was a massive amount of resources and organization behind them. And I'm sure there's like 20 genders among them too. But it's not just someone who feels so deeply and passionate about something. They just have to go down, to the town square and make a sign and have their voice be heard. That is not this. This is a deliberate fomentation of violence. And every time I see those mugshots, I just think to myself, what a luxury it is to be them. And, Dana, you mentioned their lives are ruined after this. I argue their lives were ruined before from whatever Kool-Aid they drank on X or whatever ridiculous Facebook site they're on, or whoever told them that they should be a different gender and have a different color hair, because clearly they've never conformed to any type of rational thinking whatsoever. And, one of the lawmakers, as they were sort of digging into this call for violence, he compared the voters to the Roman Colosseum. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what this is. This is 100% gladiator, where you have the people in charge that are egging them on. You have lawmakers like Hakeem Jeffries and Jasmine Crockett and Maxine Waters, who think that words don't carry weight, who think that it is okay for an elected official to call for violence against elected officials and law enforcement, and that they're not going to have accountability. And then you have all of the rabid fans who are watching a tiger eat a man or a lion get butchered and ripped apart and are just shouting with glee because they don't know pain. All of these people saying, it's time for us to get shot, do not know pain. All these people say, let's get arrested. You do not know what it is like to be incarcerated. All of these Upper East Side blue-haired individuals know nothing about the real world that law enforcement agents are protecting and serving. And it reminds me of, remember that white guy that was blocking the African-American woman from going to work? And it turns out that he was one of the ones that sued NYPD and got a real fat payout because they laid a hand on him during the Black Lives Matter protests, right? We saw those ones in Burning Man, tying themselves to the road. And when the law enforcement came and dragged them off, they were screaming and crying, he touched me, he grabbed me. Like the instant that they are met with accountability, they absolutely fail and wilt. But it is incumbent on those elected officials to tone down the rhetoric, because those egging on, they are aiding and abetting, and they will have consequences.
Harold, it's good to have you back around the table. Do you think that the media and Democrat leaders in the House and the Senate bear any responsibility for some of these people?
People in public, but thanks for being glad to have me back. I'm glad to be back.
Welcome, Harold.
There's too much of this talk in politics, and anyone that acts on this talk or acts because they heard someone else talk, and you harm an elected official, you harm a law enforcement official, I'm a believer that the penalties should be much harsher. I did push back a little bit on everybody around the table about this being a Democrat thing. We unfortunately had to deal with what we dealt with in Minnesota, the tragedies there last week, and I didn't inquire about the politics, but I learned that the person who might have done it might have had different politics than the people that he went after. All that being said, it is unfortunate that hate and violence in our country is bipartisan. It's also unfortunate and true we have too much of it. And if it's Democrats doing it on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they should be condemned. If it's Republicans doing it only on Friday, they should be condemned. I think every politician has to take a step back and realize that even when you mean it, and even when you say it and mean it only in jest, or you mean it only a third or a quarter, or only to get a reaction from the crowd, some people don't take it that way. Some people take it far more harshly and seriously. Now to ICE, I agree with Tom Hman there. Anybody, any elected official or law enforcement official looking to block or impede ICE from doing their job should be held accountable. I'll say to Mr. Hman, I also hope that the first thing he said when he got this job is that he was going to hold the worst, go after the worst first. It's important to note, of the deportations that we've had so far, only 6% of them have been hardened criminals. You even have...
Are you sure about that,
That's a
Harold?
woefully inadequate percentage, respectfully.
Okay, well, let's look at the facts, and we can woefully talk about what the facts are. But only 6% of only 6% of deportations have been hardened criminals. We can fact check it in the.
We will.
What
I guarantee
you have
you
to
will
figure out
fact
what the
check that.
definition is. If it's 6% of killers, that's amazing. Even that's like still 6%.
No, hear me out. But of the people they have deported, only 6%. No, I agree with you. Any one of them. If we only got one in their 1,000, I don't disagree with that. My point is, I want to. This debate is going on in the administration. President Trump has had members of his cabinet say that maybe we shouldn't be deporting agriculture workers and others so quickly. They came back and said we're going to continue to do that. The challenge we have right now, as it relates to ICE, is the hierarchy of deportations. We need an immigration bill that gives them not only the resources from the Big Beautiful Bill, but give them new rules and protocols that are tougher on people coming to the country, and ensuring that when you get here, if there indeed is a path to citizenship, we allow people to do that. But let me be clear. Anyone that attacks an ICE agent, needs to be held to the full account of the law.
Thank you, Harold. It would be easier to get the hardened criminals out if you guys would cooperate in your cities.
Over 76% though had convictions.
I think back around the table, Harold.
Okay.
Not hardened criminals, though.
Okay, we're going to fact check you in the brick. I can't wait.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.